Hello, language learners and travel enthusiasts. Welcome to Globe-Trotting English, Travel Talk. I'm Sarah, your friendly neighborhood travel blogger.
And I'm Mike, an ESL teacher with a love for all things travel. Today, we're diving into essential travel vocabulary and expressions that'll help you navigate your next adventure with confidence.
That's right, Mike. Whether you're planning a weekend getaway or a round-the-world trip, this episode is packed with useful language you can start using right away.
So grab your virtual passport and let's embark on this linguistic journey together.
Let's kick things off with some vocabulary related to trip planning. Mike, what's the first thing you usually do when planning a trip?
Great question, Sarah. I always start by researching destinations. This means looking up information about different places I might want to visit.
Excellent. And once you've chosen a destination, you might need to book a flight or make a reservation. Can you explain these terms for our listeners, Mike?
Certainly. To book a flight means to purchase a ticket for air travel. For example, I booked a flight to Rome for next month. To make a reservation is similar, but it's often used for hotels, restaurants, or activities. You might say, I made a reservation at a lovely bed and breakfast in Tuscany.
Perfect explanations. Now, let's...
Great topic. We have suitcase, which is a large bag for clothes and other items. Then there's carry-on, which is a smaller bag you can take on the plane with you. Don't forget about checked baggage, which is luggage you hand over to the airline to put in the cargo hold.
Excellent. Here's a quick challenge for our listeners. Can you think of 3 items you'd pack in your carry-on? Pause the podcast for a moment and make a mental list.
That's a fun exercise, Sarah. While our listeners are thinking, let's move on to some vocabulary you might hear at the airport. One important phrase is go through security. What does this mean, Sarah?
To go through security means to pass through the checkpoint where your bags are scanned and you walk through a metal detector. It's an essential part of air travel. For instance, make sure you arrive early to go through security before your flight.
Absolutely. And once you're through security, you might head to your gate, which is where you'll board your plane. You might hear an announcement like Flight 123 to Paris is now boarding at Gate 15.
Great point, Mike. Now let's talk about some useful expressions you might use while traveling. One I find particularly helpful is could you recommend? This can be used in various situations. For example, could you recommend a good local restaurant?
That's a fantastic phrase, Sarah. Another useful expression is how do I get to? This is perfect for asking for directions. You might say, how do I get to the nearest subway station?
Excellent. Let's challenge our listeners again. Try to create a short dialogue using both of these expressions. Pause the podcast and give it a try.
Great idea. While they're practicing, let's discuss some vocabulary related to accommodations. Sarah, can you tell us about different types of places travelers might stay?
Of course, Mike. We have hotels, which are the most common. Then there are hostels, which are usually cheaper and have shared rooms. Vacation rentals are becoming popular too. These are apartments or houses you can rent for your stay. And don't forget bed and breakfasts, which are smaller, often family-run establishments that provide a place to sleep and breakfast in the morning.
Fantastic overview. Now, when you're staying at any of these places, you might need to ask for certain items. Can you give us some examples of useful phrases for this, Sarah?
Absolutely. You might need to say, could I have some extra towels, please? Or is there a hairdryer in the room? These are polite ways to request items or information from hotel staff.
Perfect examples. Now, let's wrap up with some travel idioms. One common one is off the beaten path. What does this mean, Sarah?
Off the beaten path refers to places that are less touristy or less frequently visited. For example, we found a charming little cafe off the beaten path in Paris.
Excellent. Another good one is to hit the road, which means to start a journey. You might say, we need to hit the road early to avoid traffic.
These idioms are great for sounding more natural when speaking English. Listeners, try to use one of these idioms in a sentence of your own.
Well, it looks like we've covered a lot of ground in today's episode. We've discussed vocabulary for trip planning, airports, accommodations, and even some useful travel idioms.
Absolutely, Mike. Remember, the key to improving your English is practice. Try to use these new words and phrases in your conversations, even if you're not traveling right now.
Great point, Sarah. And don't worry if you make mistakes, that's all part of the learning process.
That brings us to the end of today's episode of Globe-Trotting English, Travel Talk. We hope you've enjoyed this journey through travel vocabulary and expressions.
If you found this helpful, don't forget to subscribe to our English with Podcast channel on YouTube for more language learning content.
And feel free to leave comments with any questions or suggestions for future episodes. Until next time, happy learning and safe travels.
Bon voyage, everyone.